This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, Detroit sports fans? Welcome to the Fan Report, a show made by fans for fans, powered by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I'm Nick, and joining me today is our boy Anders, going to give us this week's topics.
Well, the Lions are continuing to interview candidates, and some things are going our way and some things aren't, if we're being completely honest. And the Pistons just lost a major piece of their season in Killian Hayes. We'll talk about that, as well as the emergence of Jerami Grant and the disappearance of Sekou. It's Fan Report.
We actually got quite a bit to talk about today, so I kind of wanted to just jump right into things and not mess around too much. I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you all had a good weekend, but it's business time.
Business time.
And I want to kind of start off with just a Lions rapid fire, because there's a ton of Lions news to get to. I don't know that if we really want to talk about everything in depth that we'd be able to get to it all today, along with Pistons talk. So.
Pistons talk is tentative. We'll put it that way, depending on how long we go with the Lions talk.
Fair enough. So I'm going to try to run through this, obviously, while still breaking things down, talking about it, giving our opinions. But I also wanted to go through it as quickly as possible. So I'll start off with this. Reports are stating, and we're kind of getting some news now, that a couple of the cards on the Lions Guess Who game board have fallen, and who's going to be the next GM and head coach, who's the next GM and head coach of this organization and this team. And those guys are John Schneider re-upping with the Seahawks for a long-term deal, I believe taking them all the way to 2027. I think I saw that, as well as reports have, there was kind of some grumblings going out there that Robert Saleh did not actually interview very well with the Lions. Then we had conflicting reports from the more reliable sources saying that it was a great interview. Don't worry. Well, now reports are coming out that guys like Darrell Bevell, Marvin Lewis were actually had better interviews than Robert Saleh. And so now Robert Saleh is essentially off the table. He's not being invited back to a second interview with the Lions. And
yeah, Dave Birkett just put out an article in the Free Press just a few hours ago saying that the Lions may be out on the 49ers defensive coordinator, but the New York Jets may be giving him a second interview.
Yes, the Jets are going to be giving him a second interview, and the Lions are not. So that kind of gives you an idea that Robert Saleh is now no longer in the picture. Much to my disappointment. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it as well. How disappointed are you that Robert Saleh is not going to be the head coach of the Detroit Lions next year?
Oh, I'm bummed. He was my top guy, and I'm very curious what could possibly have gone so south in the interview that he goes from one of the most coveted coaching candidates that we have to not even being considered for a second interview. Was there that big of red flags going on? I'm starting to worry that I'm going to be really upset if he goes somewhere and ends up being successful, because then that just means that we just don't know how to spot talent in terms of coaching. So I don't know if I should be mad at the Lions for not being able to spot something, or if there is legitimately some major red flags of Robert Saleh that we just don't know about. I
mean, it's not just the Lions, though. He's interviewed with multiple teams, and it seems that the Jets are the only team that has decided to bring him back for a second interview, as far as I know. I could be totally wrong on that, and he could be getting second interviews with multiple teams. But of the teams that need head coaching, that have head coaching vacancies, it seems like the Jets are really the only ones that are interested in bringing him back for another interview. So in that case, it's not just the Lions that wouldn't know how to interview. It's 5 other teams that didn't know how to interview either and didn't see his potential. I mean, it does worry me a little bit because, again, I thought Robert Saleh is a guy that players want to play for. They get up, they play effectively for him, and they play above what you expect them to for a guy like Robert Saleh, and that's what we need here. We need a guy to set a culture, set a tone, and have players be excited to play for him, because we didn't have that here in Detroit under Matt Patricia, and we had it to an extent under Jim Caldwell, but the guy was a terrible game manager, and I would hope that Robert Saleh would be a better game manager.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan did come out and say that he's not expecting to have Robert Saleh on his coaching staff next year. He says, "I don't know what's wrong with people if they don't hire him," and I quote.
I mean, I agree, 100%. Like I've said, he was my top candidate, or one of my top candidates, with Eric Bieniemy being the other one.
Who, as far as we know, I believe Eric Bieniemy is still in the running, right?
He is still in the running, as far as we know. Now, there have been some interesting reports come out with Eric Bieniemy, and that's actually going to take me right into my next question here. There's been a lot of reports of Eric Bieniemy having a lot of run-ins with the law in terms of domestic violence cases and being charged with assaults on a woman during his playing years in the NFL. Does that kind of give you cause for concern, or do you think that's more of a smokescreen being thrown out there by a team just trying to dig up as much dirt on him as they can to try to get other teams away from him? Does that worry you at all?
I don't know if it's a smokescreen per se, but it doesn't worry me. I mean, it was a while ago. If I remember correctly, this was in the 90s. Yep. So people make mistakes, and I'm a believer, and you can make up for those mistakes. You can make yourself better. You can live a better life, and I'm a believer in forgiveness. And from what I've seen, I don't think he's had any run-ins with the law in any recent years. So it doesn't bother me at all. Now, it could very well be a smokescreen that other teams are throwing out, but I'm not bothered by it. Looks like the last one was September 93, where he harassed a parking attendant. I was an infant.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you. Like, this happened a long time ago. He hasn't had any other issues that we know of in recent years, not even within the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. This was in a situation where he was young, dumb, probably not mature, and had some run-ins and some bad situations that he put himself in. But he's obviously learned from that and become a better man for it. So, no, it doesn't worry me. I actually do think it's a team that is going out there. See, I'm on the other side where I think it is a team that's trying, or someone connected to a team, trying to get other teams to be disinterested in him, because he is a hot candidate. He is the hot name out there that teams desperately want. He's had extreme success. So I think it may be someone who is connected to another team that is trying to throw some other teams off the scent a little bit and try to get them to be disinterested in Eric Bieniemy. If that's true, it's dirty tactics and it's messed up, but that's the way the NFL works in a lot of ways, and that's the way pro sports works in a lot of ways. So I still hope the Lions aren't straying away from it. I know that Rod Wood and Sheila Ford and the Ford family in particular are more of the company men and the good men. They want people like that in their organization that are good moral citizens, and that's not necessarily how you win in the NFL, and so that may shy the Lions away from a little bit. Now that would concern me, because that means that they aren't putting football at the forefront, which they should be at this point, especially considering it's been 20 some odd years since these incidents happened, and he's obviously learned from it and grown as an individual. Next question, Andrew. This is one that actually kind of flew under both of our radars, and I don't even think this is a name we've mentioned, but the Lions are going to be bringing back somebody for a second interview as a potential GM candidate. He is the Los Angeles Rams director of college scouting. It's Brad Holmes, who's going to be coming in to have an in-person interview. He had the Zoom interview, I believe, last Monday. I could be wrong on that, but they are going to be bringing him back for an in-person interview, which, especially during COVID times, but if you're being called back for a second interview for a GM job, they're only doing that with the real serious candidates in this situation. So this is a guy that the Lions are taking a big time look at, and he's a legitimate candidate to be the Lions' future GM starting next year. Andrew, what are your thoughts and feelings on Brad Holmes to be the future GM of this team?
Well, Dave Birkett, again, put out an article. I didn't know this, but apparently he is the nephew of former Lion Luther Bradley. And so he does have some Detroit ties here, but apparently this is a guy that you're right. He's off both of our radar, but it's a guy that's impressed some teams around the league. What confuses me, though, and this is a quote from Bradley, so let's take it with a grain of salt because there's blood relation there. This is a quote from Luther Bradley saying, just the details of things that he was looking at. I mean, most guys say, oh, he looks like he's fast or he can turn his hips. Yeah, but he was looking at, do you think he has the right mentality to be a defensive back? Do you see any flaws in him? He really went into detail of each individual guy that he was looking at. I was really impressed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't every GM be looking at a player's mentality? Well, I feel that's one of the highest things on the list when you're evaluating
He's a director of college scouting. He's not a GM right now, never has been. He's been with the Rams organization, I believe, for about 18 years. Mm-hmm. However, it's all been in scouting or as a PR intern or working his way up through those channels to eventually become the director of college scouting.
But I'm in general, because the scouts are the ones that inform the GM. I would assume the GM would want to know about mentality, right?
Yes, absolutely. Every single college scout should be looking at a player's mentality when scouting him. It's kind of one of the more important aspects of, is he a guy who puts in work ethic? Is he a guy who's lazy? Is he willing to put in the work in the offseason? The mentality is kind of important there. And so directors of college scouting definitely should be looking at mentality.
But
so that doesn't really sell me on anything.
Yeah, so exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. But the repeated narrative that I keep seeing, like this is from Rams Vice President Player Personnel, Tony Softly. He says, again, very sharp, extreme attention to detail. That's kind of the repeated narrative we're seeing around this guy. And you do look at the results of, I mean, not probably him solely, but the results of that scouting department and that GM. I mean, this is a team that took Aaron Donald 13th overall. This is a team that did take Cooper Kupp, took safety John Johnson in middle rounds. So like it's not like this is a poor scouting department. Now, does it get me excited for him as GM? I guess I don't know. He's a name that just popped up. He seems to be getting interest. I know the Falcons, I believe, flew him in for a second interview too. So it seems that there's teams that are interested in him, like seriously interested in him, and it seems like he's probably going to land a GM job this offseason. There could be worse options. It doesn't get me super excited. There's another name that I'm assuming is going to come up in a little bit later that gets me a little more excited. But I don't hate this. I also don't love it.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I'm actually a little bit confused with the Lions, of him being actually a really serious candidate for the Lions. And the reason being is this kind of goes the exact opposite of what Sheila Ford and Rod Wood had said about what they're looking for in a GM candidate.
That's true, too.
And it's someone who is an experienced and proven GM in this league. And he's never been a GM, never been an assistant GM. So he's by definition, not experienced as a general manager in this league. So I'm a little bit surprised to see his name come up. Now, is there a lot of positives to look at with Brad Holmes? Yes, you have the draft successes for the Rams to look at, and I can't really look at free agency or trades because that's not his department. But when you just look at the drafting for the Rams, it's been a success. Cam Akers is a solid running back. You mentioned John Johnson in the middle rounds. There's another guy. You mentioned Aaron Donald, which is a big one. They've had a lot of success in the drafts almost on a yearly basis, and not just in the first round, but in multiple rounds. So, and that's something that the Lions really desperately need to kind of hit a home run with is rebuilding with the draft. And I'm actually going to get into that word rebuild in a little bit here, a little bit more. And this comes from a Dave Birkett interview today that I heard. But again, it's something to be a little bit excited about. But again, this is not a guy that's experienced. This isn't somebody who was really at the top of our list, on our radar. This is someone who, like I mentioned before, we didn't even know that he came in for a first interview. It wasn't widely reported. So this is someone who isn't as much of a touted candidate for a lot of these jobs. Yes, the Falcons are interested in bringing him back. So he probably does get a GM job or something close to it. But I guess we'll see. And obviously the Lions are taking a big look at him here. So it doesn't excite me, but it doesn't worry me at all. Now, moving on to the next topic at hand is Lions interviewed Ed Dodds today for the GM position. And I'm starting to kind of see a theme that the Lions are going to actually be going the route of hiring a GM before they hire a head coach, which in my opinion is
that's what it
mucho
like.
Gusto or mucho grande good. I don't know. I can't speak Spanish, but it's good. That's
mucho grande good.
It's what I wanted. So to see the Lions going this route is a good thing. So Ed Dodds' interview happened today, and that was obviously a name that was higher up on our list. He is kind of the gold standard with the Colts. He has been a very large figure in that front office for a few years now. So to have the Lions an option for Ed Dodds, or Ed Dodds be an option for the Lions, that's something that does excite me quite a bit, because the Colts are an organization that, at least in recent years, have a lot of success, and it comes through the draft as well as through multiple other ways. And sure, they didn't get to the levels that they wanted to this year, but again, they probably really are a team that is just a quarterback away. They're a team that is right there. So, but we haven't heard anything. We haven't heard any reports on how the interview went with Ed Dodds. So, Andrew, does the lack thereof in terms of reports on how this interview went, does that worry you about the potential for Ed Dodds to become the future GM of this team?
No, because we don't hear a lot of things out of these interviews. We didn't really hear how Eric Bieniemy's interview went, or if we did, I missed it. Like, it's the interviews aren't always like super public, so it's not something that worries me to find out that we haven't heard anything yet. What worries me is I just don't think we're going to get him. Just knowing Ed Dodd's history. I mean, he interviewed with the Browns, I believe, last season. He pulled out of that one. It's not like they didn't hire him. He pulled out. He just pulled out of the Carolina Panthers job like a few days ago. And it's like he's really selective with where he goes. It just even surprised me that he even came into Detroit for that even accepted an interview with the Lions. That alone surprised me because I don't feel like the Lions are that attractive of a GM opening. So no, I'm not too worried, and I don't have high hopes. But this is the guy I mentioned just a little bit ago. I said this is the guy that really excites me, but I don't have high hopes. And yeah, I'm not too worried about not having heard anything yet.
I mean, does the fact that he has pulled out of other potential jobs and he's still going to see interviews for the Lions and hear what the Lions have to say, I mean, that's kind of a reason to maybe believe that the Lions are a real player here. He hasn't called the Lions back and say thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going to have the interview. So I mean, there's at least one step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. Ed Dodds is kind of one of the big names that I would like to see here in Detroit. He is a guy that, again, I put up towards top of my list. He is kind of the gold standard as the assistant GM for the Colts, and he is a name that excites me quite a bit. Another name that's come up a lot that could be a guy that to be the GM of this team is Terry Fontenot. Terry Fontenot is another one that I believe he's interviewed, hasn't he?
I actually don't know.
Yes, they did. They did interview him, I believe. I don't know. But he was the New Orleans Saints president and assistant general manager of pro personnel. There's another guy who, honestly, he kind of excites me. The Saints are an organization that have had long-term success through the draft and in many different ways of being able to sustain success, even with a quarterback who can't throw downfield past week 7. They've found ways to win, and Terry Fontenot is a big reason for that. So see the Lions be a player in that game is one that really excites me, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts there as well.
The way I think about Terry Fontenot, like it's how I think of like a normal, like if I was a hiring manager in a normal organization looking at a resume, the same thing about like what would excite me there is the same thing that kind of excites me about Terry Fontenot, and that's seeing how consistently he's elevated in his career, how consistently he's grown. I mean, he's taken multiple positions with the Saints, and he's grown all the way from a low level in the scouting department all the way to the GM's right hand man. So like it's when you see that kind of growth, that he stood out in the organization, and you know that there's something there that would, because obviously you don't know too much about him, but just on that alone makes you think that there's some there that makes you think that he can be an effective general manager. He's got that factor that allows him to continue moving up within an organization. And you bring up a good point that the Saints have made many good draft picks. They're not a team that's known for not drafting well. They're not a team. They're a team that's sustained success over decade.
And the only way to do that in the NFL is to draft well. So he's a guy who obviously has done that. Before I get into the final option here, and I'm going to kind of bridge two topics together. Actually, I'm just going to kind of try to bridge all the rest of them together. But we talked about John Schneider and the possibility of him coming to the Lions last week. News reports today said that he has re-upped with the Seahawks for a long-term deal. Does that at all kind of cause you to want the Lions to put a little more pressure on the gas pedal here to try to go get a GM candidate before, kind of shit or get off the pot type of deal? Does that kind of cause you any kind of panic for the Lions here? Does any panic set in for the Lions and really needing to really get going on getting a GM before it's too late?
Well, if I'm being completely honest, I was actually really high on John Schneider until our last episode where you kind of shifted my opinion on him a bit. Now I'm starting to feel like we kind of dodged a bullet on John Schneider. But you haven't really been seeing a lot of the big name GMs go off the market yet. So I do think, yes, this should add a sense of urgency for the Lions, but in general, they should be hiring a GM pretty soon because I would like to see them hire their GM before they hire a coach because I would like to see that GM have a say in who we bring in as coach. So in general, I think they should be having a sense of urgency, but yeah, naturally, once you see the first big name get ticked off the list, you're going to want to start ramping things up a bit. So I do think it adds the urgency, but I don't think it's panic mode yet. It's just, all right, let's ramp it up to the next level now.
I agree. And seeing John Schneider re-up with the Seahawks at the same time I felt two things. At first I was like, oh, shit, wow. Now what's the Lions' direction? But then I was also like, okay, this wasn't even a guy that I really put up in my top 3, let alone my top, was at the top of my list. So this isn't somebody that I feel like the Lions really missed out on, like, oh, damn, we missed our guy. No, I just like you just mentioned, he wasn't a guy that I was all that excited about. I didn't like his recent draft history. I feel like there was a lot of holes in his resume there that I don't think would have really helped the Lions too much. So with that being said, there's one of the other big names, and in all reality, the three biggest names on my list, the three top guys, are all still available. And the third one being Kevin Colbert. He's a name that just keeps coming up as a potential for the Lions to steal away from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's a name that obviously any Lions fan would get excited about. Steelers are another organization that have had long-term success. And a lot of it's consistency with the front office, as well as with an extremely good future Hall of Fame head coach in Mike Tomlin, along with a future Hall of Fame quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. But to develop that kind of that long-term success and consistency, it starts with that front office. And Kevin Colbert's been a big reason for it out there. So him still being available, in the interview with Dave Birkett that I listened to was courtesy of 97.1 on my way home today. He talked about Kevin Colbert as a guy that could potentially come to Detroit. That's a name that he just still keeps seeing popping up. He keeps getting, going back to it and saying, hey, this could be a guy. But Andrew, does Kevin Colbert as a realistic option, is that something you would get excited about? And do you think it's actually a realistic option for the Lions?
Well, my question is, because I actually haven't heard his name pop up on the Lions GM search yet. But
it's been up there.
Have they interviewed him?
Apparently, it could happen this week if they are going to. They could make the huge pitch to him this week.
Yep.
But his name has kind of come up as a name that the Lions could poach him away.
Because I think it's going to take us like a pretty big offer to a pretty big pitch to get him here. Because what was it last week? Jason LaConfort had come out and said that they expect Kevin Colbert to be back as GM of the Steelers at least through next year. So I do think he does have interest in remaining with the Steelers, which I think is going to take a pretty big elevator pitch. Not just an elevator pitch, a pretty big pitch overall, a pretty big package to, well, no pun intended.
This is where I'm not entirely sold on the LaConfort report, and the reason being is the Steelers their season's been over for 3-4 days now. We've still got no word that it actually has happened. And that report came out 9 days ago, and still nothing has happened. So I'm not exactly entirely sold that it's a done deal between Colbert and the Steelers. I think he's waiting.
LaConfort is saying he expects it to happen.
I think he's waiting to hear what the Lions have to say and what they have to offer before he makes a decision. He's keeping the door open to the Lions to make him an offer that he can't refuse.
Yeah.
But
that's why I brought that up, is because it's not like this is a guy that seemingly wants out of Pittsburgh. Like, you're going to have to wow him with an offer to pry him away. That's why I brought that up.
Fair enough. But going back to the Birkett interview, he also talked about
I do love him as a GM hire if we do get him.
Oh, I do too. Absolutely. How could you not? They're between, as I said, the three pieces that I would say are at the top of my radar are Kevin Colbert, Ed Dodds, and Terry Fonson. Like, those three guys are the three picks that I would say if you got any one of those three guys as your GM, that's a step in the right direction to the path of success for the Lions organization in my mind. But so going back to that Dave Birkett interview, he talked about, with some of these names that have been brought out there, the question has been asked, what do you do with Matthew Stafford? And whether or not he's going to be back this year. And he says he's starting to lean towards where, maybe last week or the week before he thought, okay, Stafford's career in Detroit's probably done. He's going to get traded or he's going to want out because he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild. Well, and the words he used were, it doesn't seem like there's an appetite for a rebuild in this organization, whether it be the ownership or whoever they want to bring in as the GM or the future coach, or with Matthew Stafford, obviously. So does the idea that there isn't an appetite for a rebuild with this organization, does that give you any cause for concern on the path that they're taking with this team?
Yeah, because this is not a quick fix on the fly type of situation. You're in a situation with this football team where you have enough that's not working, where you need to just keep your young core guys, and you need to start work, like especially in the defense. You need to start building up from scratch again. You might not need to rebuild too much on the offense. I mean, you have a young stud tight end. You have what could be a young stud running back in DeAndre Swift.
You have a second-team All-Pro on your offensive line.
Yep. You have a stud wide receiver as long as you resign him in Kenny Galladay. So, like, you don't need to do too much rebuilding on the offensive side of the football. That defense needs a complete teardown. It's just a matter of fact. So, like, if they're saying there's not much of an appetite for rebuild, if what they're referring to is a complete rebuild in terms of offense and defense, okay, sure, you've invested enough young pieces, enough high assets, high draft picks in that offense to not really want to rebuild already. But that defense, I don't think there's any getting around it. You're building on a bad foundation at this point.
Well, your linebacking core is depleted entirely. You have next to no defensive line. It's been terrible. Your secondary, which you thought would be better this year, was actually putrid. Jeff Okudah looks like he could be a bust. I'm not saying he is. Mm-hmm. You know, I hate to use the B word for a guy who really didn't play all that much this year due to injury. But when he did play, he was graded out as one of the worst coverage corners in the league. And you drafted him number 3 overall. So, yes, the defense really does need a rebuild from the ground up in a lot of ways at all levels. Not just one level or 2 levels, at all levels on that defense. You need to rebuild entirely. And the offense, there isn't much, so to speak, to rebuild there. I think there's a couple of pieces you may have to switch out. You may not keep Kenny Galladay, which then you got to rebuild your receiving grouping, your receiving core, because you are probably losing Marvin Jones, and then you would be losing your top 2 receivers there, which means you're probably drafting a receiver high and then signing one as well. The running back room, you've got DeAndre Swift, but beyond that, what do you have? Mm-hmm. But your offensive line, in my opinion, really is where is really probably the biggest strength of that offense right now in terms of long-term sustainability and success. And it hinges around guys like Frank Ragnow and Taylor Decker and their health and continued development, and guys like Jonah Jackson continuing to develop and being good. You've got to get that right side shored up for sure, but you've got a good foundation with that offensive line. But again, it also hinges on what you do with Matthew Stafford. And the reports that he could be coming back because they don't want to have a rebuild in this city do worry me a little bit, because like I mentioned, I love Matthew Stafford. I love his game. I love his toughness and his tenacity and his grit. But I want to see him go off and win somewhere else, because I just don't see him doing it here. I don't think this team is ready. A team that has, in my opinion, a team that has picked in the top 10 for 3 straight years is not a team that can say we don't need to rebuild.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a team that is ready to win. You've picked in the top 10 3 years in a row, one of which was in the top 5, and that's not a team that's successful. It's just not. So clearly something is not going right, and you need to start looking at a possible rebuild in that regard. So, and if Matthew Stafford doesn't want to stick around for it, well, I don't blame him, 1. And 2, I don't think you want him to be around for a rebuild, because he's very expensive right now. He's a very high-priced quarterback. And also, I don't think you can ever be bad enough with him to really get your rebuild going the right way, especially with the way that the offense is built. Well, there's already pieces in place there. So I don't think you'll ever be bad enough to really get a good shot at getting this rebuild done properly. So them saying that the potential is there for him to be coming back, that does worry me quite a bit. Now, moving on into some of the head coaching conversations here, and well, actually, before we get into that, there's been reports out of Houston and the possibility of Deshaun Watson wanting out of that situation. Andrew, does Deshaun Watson potentially asking for a trade, does that affect the tradability of a guy like Matthew Stafford in your mind when it comes to there's another option out there to go get?
Because I think virtually every team in the NFL will, if they're trying to give up some prime assets for a quarterback, they're going to try to jump at Deshaun Watson first. However, I do think Deshaun Watson maybe a little more selective about where he goes than Matthew Stafford would be if we were to try to trade Matthew Stafford. So there's that. But in general, yeah, virtually every team in the NFL will want Deshaun Watson or Matthew Stafford. So yes, that affects his tradability definitely.
See, I'm actually going to take the other side of the coin, and I'm going to say no. I really don't think it does. Yes, and the reason being is because I think the teams that are going to be looking at Matthew Stafford probably aren't the same teams that are going to be looking at Deshaun Watson, because the teams that are looking at Matthew Stafford are the teams that are just a quarterback away from winning and already don't have the draft capital to go get a guy like Deshaun Watson. They're not in play for him. Deshaun Watson's probably going to command a high first-round draft pick or 2 probably 2 high first-round draft picks, and probably another pick on top of that. And most of the teams that would be looking at guys like Matthew Stafford are either already playoff teams or were near playoff teams. Teams like Washington, teams like San Francisco, teams like Indy, Tampa Bay, probably if Brady decides to hang it up or is nearing the end there. There's a lot of teams that are probably going to be looking at quarterbacks that or Pittsburgh, another one, that are good football teams that have had long-term success and even made the playoffs this year, that could be looking to get younger at the quarterback position or be looking to get a quarterback at all. And Matthew Stafford is a guy. And those teams I don't think are in line with the draft capital to go get a Deshaun Watson. They're not high enough in the draft. They're not going to be next year. So they're not going to be able to get him. They're not in play for him. Mm-hmm. Teams that are in play for him are like the reports that have come out that there's a potential that Dolphins could be looking to trade for him. You're throwing Tua Tagovailoa in the 3rd overall pick to go get Deshaun Watson. That's a trade that makes a lot of sense. That's not a team that would look at Matthew Stafford, though. So there's a situation where the teams that are looking, that are probably really in play for Deshaun Watson, are probably not the teams looking at a guy like Matthew Stafford, because that's not where their direction is. Deshaun Watson's a 25-year-old quarterback who is very expensive, but he's younger. You have time with him to build the rest of your roster. With Matthew Stafford, you want to have a ready to go roster to win now.
You bring a good point
So
up.
that's why I don't really think it affects the tradability of Matthew Stafford all that much, because 1, he's a lot cheaper. 2, it's not the same teams that are looking at each option, because they're in different ballparks in terms of who has the opportunity to go get each guy. Not saying guys like the teams like the Dolphins don't have the opportunity to get Matthew Stafford. It's just they're not going to. They're not going to, trade away Tua to bring in Matthew Stafford. That doesn't make sense. Going after Deshaun Watson, trading Tua, that makes a little more sense because he's young and really good. But so moving on into the head coaching talk here with the Lions, it's been reported that obviously, like we mentioned, Robert Saleh, not a guy that's going to be a candidate for the Lions, not being called back for another interview, which is obviously disappointing for us, but 2 names did get rave reviews on their interviews with the Lions, and that is Marvin Lewis and Darrell Bevell, which is a surprising one to me, as 2 guys who could potentially be at the the end of the 2 of the final names on the list for the Lions to go after in terms of the head coaching position. Before I get into another name that I've heard about with the Lions doing a ton of background info, gathering a ton of background info on, do the names Marvin Lewis and Darrell Bevell excite you at all for the Lions next year?
You want to talk about 2 names that make me rage quit the Lions? Those are 2 right there, is Darrell Bevell and Marvin Lewis. I mean, if I had to pick between the 2, I guess I stick with Bevell, but I don't want to, and I don't want Marvin Lewis. So Marvin Lewis is going to keep Stafford around. Let's be honest here.
I think they both would. I absolutely think they both would.
Yeah, and Bevell will too. Like, neither of these guys are a coach that's going to come in here and revamp this offense, give it a completely new look, new feel. Neither of these guys are going to do that. You saw what Bevell was going to do. Yeah, Stafford looked a little bit better under him the last few games, but it's not like it's still the same offense. It's just he threw a little bit more. That's all. No, neither of those. Not only do neither of those names excite me, both those names would piss me off as a Lions fan.
I actually agree with you. Like, both those names would make me very sad as a Lions fan, because that just,
especially if you hire them before you hired a GM, that'll make me even more mad.
That'd be even worse. It's a situation where, and I honestly, I'm starting to feel like the Lions aren't going to be asking for anybody to come back for a second interview for a head coaching position until they hire the GM, so that they can come back for the second interview to interview with the future GM of this team, which I like that. 1, I'll preface things with that. 2, the names Marvin Lewis and Darrell Bevell excite me so little that it would absolutely disappoint me. And the reason because it tells me what the direction, again, it tells me what the direction this team is going to be. And
it's called keeping the status quo.
Yes. And what's the status quo been for the Lions in the last 25 years? Bad. Yeah. I was waiting for that. I mean, and the Darrell Bevell one, he honestly even confused me even more because, 1, when do you ever see an incumbent, or not an incumbent, an interim head coach ever win the job? 2, I mean, it happens very rarely. The offense that Darrell Bevell employs was the same offense that was shut out by the Panthers this same season. Why would that excite you for this organization? I'll just say that. And I know that was probably the worst game they played. There was injuries, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. The Lions offense was not electric this year. Yes, they played better under Darrell Bevell. Yes, the offense looked better under Darrell Bevell. However, still doesn't excite me at all. Marvin Lewis, by definition, mediocrity. That's all I got to say there.
He's the epitome of mediocrity.
Yes. But the third name that I've heard that the Lions could be looking to bring in for a third interview, Dan Campbell. They've done a ton of background work on him, and that name continues to come up repeatedly as a guy who could potentially be the candidate for the Lions head coaching gig. And there actually is one more name that I will talk about before we move on into the Pistons. But Andrew, what are your thoughts on...
Yeah, the other name was the one I thought you were going to bring up. Kind of surprised me, the Dan Campbell one.
No, this Dan Campbell and the other guy I'm talking about actually interviewed today. But Dan Campbell is a name that has come up a lot for the Lions, and they're continuing to do a lot of background info on. But Andrew, what are your thoughts on Dan Campbell, who is currently, to give you an idea, the New Orleans Saints tight ends coach, but he has a lot of experience as a coach in the NFL. He was also a 10-year NFL veteran, so he played a long time in this league as well. But what are your thoughts there?
Again, unless there's something I'm missing on the guy, doesn't really excite me either. I mean, it's not like he's a guy that has success pedigree as a head coach. Yeah, he won a Super Bowl with the Saints, I believe.
I think it was with the Saints. He was also the interim head coach of the Dolphins when they fired Joe Philbin.
Yeah, and he 5-7 in that time.
Let's be real, that Dolphins team was not good.
Nope, it was not. But it's just like there's not too much I'm seeing with Dan Campbell that would suggest to me that this is a head coaching candidate that's going to wow me or even impress me. Like it's a complete stab in the dark. There just isn't much there for me to grab onto, which is why I can't really get excited about it. Am I off on that?
I mean, yes and no. I think the fact that he's worked his way up the Saints ranks a little bit and is the tight ends coach as well as the assistant head coach of Sean Payton does give me a reason to believe that, hey, if they believe in him to be the right-hand man to Sean Payton, maybe we should believe in him to be the head guy here. There is some reason to think there's a level of success that can be achieved there. I think also learning underneath Sean Payton is something that is also really good. He's able to be under the wing of Peyton and could have learned quite a few things there. But I don't know. Is he a name that's towards the top of my list? No, not really. And unfortunately, one of the names that is towards the top of my list is gone. He's not necessarily gone, but it doesn't seem to be a guy that's in consideration for the position. But it doesn't excite me that much. But again, it's a name that I see come up a lot. And Dave Birkett also says that he thinks if he were to take a shot in the dark as of right now, he thinks that Dan Campbell could be the guy. So there's obviously some reason to believe there that Dan Campbell could be the future head coach of the Lions. So there's actually two other names. Before we get into the one who interviewed today, the other name.
Here's the thing about Dan Campbell, too. I just found this. This is from CowboysSI.com. Apparently, there is a lot of influence in Detroit that the people have enough influence and favor with the Detroit Lions that Campbell could actually be pushed to the front of the pack in terms of coaching candidacies. So that it does seem that there are some people inside the Lions organization that are really pulling for Dan Campbell. Again, I don't know why, but
personal connections.
Yep.
But two other names that have been talked about for the Lions this week in particular. One name I believe hasn't interviewed yet, but is expected to this week is Buccaneers defensive coordinator Todd Bowles. He's obviously done a really good job with the Bucs defense, but does the name Todd Bowles tickle your fancy at all? After I believe he was with the Jets for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I don't think he was a defensive coordinator.
No, he was a head coach.
Yeah, the head coach, 15 to 18.
Yeah. Does Todd Bowles excite you at all?
I mean, as a head coach, he did have a winning season with the Jets one time in his first season. He went 10-6, but no, he won 14 games in the next 3 years. Yeah, and then his time with Tampa has been nice as a defensive coordinator. He's done a really great job there with that defense, but obviously it's the Jets, so you got to take the record with a grain of salt. But it's not the line situations that much different. So, and again, not too excited about it. The Jets got progressively worse every year under him. So
you could probably blame a lot of that on the front office, but I don't necessarily disagree. I think you would see probably 1 year of success with Todd Bowles, but other than that, a lot of mediocrity. It's a guy who is looking for a second chance, so to speak. I think he's earned it. I think he's done well with the Buccaneers, but I just don't think that the Lions organization is the right spot for him.
He just might actually be a better fit with an organization that has a better roster under their belt than the Lions do.
Right. And now, final one, Guy we interviewed today, Arthur Smith, the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator. That's a guy who is actually near the top of my list. He's a guy who has had a lot of success with the Tennessee Titans, arguably revitalized or revived Ryan Tannehill's career, turned him into a good quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
A guy that, as you know, if you ever hear our fantasy pod, if you ever listen to our fantasy podcast, guy that I've been touting all year long. So is this a guy that you could think maybe revive, not necessarily revive, but really elongate Matthew Stafford's career, make him better than he is, or help develop the next guy to come in? Does Arthur Smith excite you at all?
Well, again, one of the big things that stands out to me with Arthur Smith is how much he's grown within that organization. I mean, he started off as well like a defensive quality assistant or some quality control coach. Sorry, defensive quality control coach 2011, and he's gradually gone all the way up to being an offensive coordinator. Now, he took over the job in 2019 and basically made a decision, hey, let's give the ball to Derrick Henry. And the rest is history. Now, the question is, the reason I do like him as a candidate, but there is this part of me that's like, do we need to have Derrick Henry here for it to work as well as it worked in Tennessee? Like,
Fair
not every
enough.
team has a guy like Derrick Henry.
We do have a talented running back here. We do.
And,
is he Derrick Henry good? No.
And Tannehill's resurgence basically came right along with Derrick Henry's emergence. So, like, I don't know. Do we need someone of that caliber? Like, is it directly related to having someone of Henry's caliber on your roster, or is he really an offensive? I wouldn't say mastermind, but is he really an offensive guru that found a way to revamp this offense? Yes, this offense looked better. Derrick Henry was on the roster before he became the offensive coordinator. He was just the one that decided, hey, we have a monster of a running back that we're not giving the ball to, so let's give the ball to him.
See, but that right there, like, and sorry to cut you off, but that right there is what honestly gives me a little more comfortability with this, with Arthur Smith. And the reason is because, like, Derrick Henry had flashes of extreme success in years past, but he was kind of middling and he wasn't ever really able to get things going. And I've always said, I personally believe, and I've said this for years, that it was entirely mismanagement on the part of the offensive coordinator and the play calling on what you do with Derrick Henry. He's one of those guys that you just let the big dog eat. You give him the ball time after time and let him go. He's a snowball rolling down a hill. He's only going to get bigger and better. And Arthur Smith was really a guy who, he looked at the talent that he had and the players that he had, and he used them to the best of their abilities. He took advantage of what he had and saw it for what it was and made sure that, hey, I've got this elite talent in Derrick Henry. I'm going to use that. I'm not going to let it go to waste like they did in years past. And he did. And the fact that he's able to recognize that, I think that's something that the Lions have actually had a little bit of struggles with in recent years, and not even in recent years, but in years past. And so, like, this is a guy that I think could be good for the Lions to find the strengths on this team, especially with the offense, and utilize them and make sure that they're a focal point of the way we run things and run our system through. So that's one of the reasons I do think Arthur Smith is towards the top of my list here. Yeah,
I mean, I agree, I kind of want to like it more than I do. It's just this nagging voice in the back of my head that's afraid that the success is a little bit inflated because of having a generational guy like that in your backfield. That's the only part I'm worried about, because, like, you look at just their last playoff game against the Ravens. Yeah, the Ravens are a really good defense, but they were able to bottle up Derrick Henry, and then Tannehill wasn't really able to do much after that. So, like, that's the part that scares me. Is it all predicated on having that kind of guy in your backfield or not? That's what scares me, but I do like it more than the guys we've talked about. So
with that logic, though, guys like Eric Bieniemy shouldn't really excite you much either.
Yeah,
he's got a generational talent he can rely on.
Yeah,
Robert Saleh's got some generational talents on his team. I mean,
Robert Saleh took a defense that is hurt mostly and still turned out a top 10 defense with half the team being out with injury.
Towards the end of the year, they weren't as good, but they showed some vulnerabilities. But again, that was a very injured defense. But again, like there's detractors to look at. You can poke holes in every single one of these candidates' resumes, when you look at some of the best names out there, like the Bieniemys, like the Arthur Smiths, you can poke holes in the fact that they've got these generational talents on their roster that really make them seem better than they probably are. But So again, like guys like Bieniemy have Patrick Mahomes. Guys like Arthur Smith he has Derrick Henry. So if you're gonna make that argument for one, you got to make it for the other as well. So that's why it doesn't really worry me as much, because we see these guys come up every single year, and sometimes they have success, sometimes they don't. We've really not had any worries with Bieniemy. And so I'm going to give Arthur Smith the same treatment here, and I'm going to say that doesn't worry me as much as it could.
Like I said, he's my favorite of the head coaching candidates, all the candidates we just named. Not that it was a great bunch before that, but like.
No, this list was a lot worse than the list we've had in recent weeks.
Yeah.
But so let's change gears here. Let's real quickly, unless you have anything else to add to the Lions talk, let's switch gears over to the Pistons.
I do have one more thing for the Lions.
Okay.
So Dane Brugler of the Athletic, he just put out a mock draft earlier today, and I just want to paint a quick picture for you. He has Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Zach Wilson all going before our pick, as well as Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase.
Ouch.
At that point,
that's the worst case scenario for the Lions. At that point, I trade back.
So I'm just curious, how excited would you be about getting a linebacker like Micah Parsons out of Penn State to Detroit? Because that's who he has going to us at 7.
I mean, okay, there are names up at the top of this list, up at the top of the draft on defense that actually do really excite me a lot. Is Micah Parsons one of those guys? Yeah, probably. Hang on, there was another name. Maybe it was Micah Parsons that would actually really excite me a lot. But Micah Parsons is a guy that would bring, he is a name that would, because obviously this linebacking core desperately needs to be rebuilt. It's bad. Like it's real bad. So to see the opportunity for the Lions to get a big name in Micah Parsons here, that is something that would be a step in the direction to get that rebuild started. But
I mean, I've said before on this show that I wouldn't mind taking Jalen Waddle, the other wide receiver out of Alabama.
The only thing that worries me about Jalen Waddle is he has had a lot of injury-plagued seasons.
That's the worry.
And
it's
we
just
tend
the
to
insane athleticism that he has is something you can't ignore, and hopefully the injuries aren't something they're going to nag throughout his career. But with Jalen Waddle, it's a guy you're going to want to trade back. You're not going to take him at 7. He's more of a mid-first-round guy. So
right. Even though he is projected to go in the top 10 in a lot of different drafts. I mean,
Jalen Waddle?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. A lot of them.
I didn't see
most I've seen actually have him in the top 10. Most I've seen.
But yeah, that's all I had. I wanted to see what your if that was Armageddon scenario, all those guys going before the Lions.
That is Armageddon scenario, but again, Micah Parsons would kind of soften the blow a little bit because he is a guy that again is could potentially be a generational talent with this organization for sure. I mean, if they were going to go like Kwity Paye, that one I would not like. Yeah. He's another one of those Michigan guys that's a lot of sizzle, no steak in my mind. But the guy that honestly, after watching him in the first half of the national championship, Devontae Smith looks real nice right now.
Yeah.
and I know it's a pipe dream, but to come around in the second round to get Mac Jones, like say he falls, but to get
it's 100% a pipe dream. But
his stock has risen so high. I've seen him even going in the top 10 at this point in some mocks. So I don't see it happening.
Yeah. But that was all I had there. So let's quickly touch on the Pistons. I know we're running a little bit over here. So quickly, I want to talk about first Sekou Doumbouya. A lot of Pistons fans have been kind of up in arms. He's played 5 minutes in each of the last 2 games. With all the injuries and rest days and that the Pistons have experienced, a lot of Pistons fans have been expecting more playing time for Sekou, and it just seems like he's getting even less. Are you kind of hitting the panic button on Sekou? We're in a situation where we're seeing everyone's getting opportunities. Sekou is not, and there's got to be a reason for it. So are you hitting a panic button, or are you thinking this is the coaching staff just not giving him a fair shot?
I think it's a little bit of both. I am significantly worried at this point because if there were ever a time for her to get opportunity to play, for him to get opportunity to play, it'd be now. Right now, because we have so many injuries. Now, I have heard a lot of reports that he is primarily playing at the 4 position. He hasn't really looked at the 3, and
he's been primarily at the 4.
And there's just not a lot of room for him at the 4 position right now. Where there's been injuries pretty much at every other position, it just seems to not have hit the 4 as much as it has other positions.
The thing is, he can play the 3, so I don't know. I don't know why.
I don't know. We think think he can play the 3. We don't know if he actually can. There's a big difference there. The scouting report for him was he could switch to the 3. That doesn't mean it's actually true. So, but yeah, it does give me reason to worry, and I'm also starting to wonder if if he's a candidate to be sent back to the G League, and at this point, because he's not getting any kind of run up here. They may not, just because of pure necessity. This roster is very thin, but he's just not getting the run here. I want to see him go where he can develop, and if that means having a stint in the G League, then so be it. I want him to be a part of the future of this organization, but as of right now, I'm just not seeing it. It doesn't look like it's going to happen.
And kind of turning in the opposite direction is a guy like Sadiq Bey, who plays similar position to Sekou, but
he's more of a 2. But
Sadiq,
yes,
oh, he's a 3-4.
He's been playing a lot of 2-3.
I haven't really seen him much of the 2 at all.
I've seen him listed as a guard on a lot of box scores.
Anyway, so part of me the reason I bring him up is part of me feels like the rise of Sadiq Bey is almost directly correlated to Sekou's loss of minutes, because it feels like Sadiq Bey is the guy that's been playing more and more. He's seen his minutes increase over like each of the last 5 games. So, and he's been really effective in those minutes. And Coach Casey's come out and said that the reason that he's been giving Sekou so much opportunity, the reason he loves putting Sekou in there is because of how much he hustles. I mean, sorry, not Sekou, Sadiq, is because of how much he hustles. Is Sadiq our best draft pick this year?
It's sure looking like it. And obviously, it's a little bit unfair to Killian Hayes because we're not really going to get to see him much at all, obviously, because he's done. Probably done for the year. Yeah,
if he has surgery, he's done.
Yeah, for the year. Sadiq, I stand corrected. He is playing more of a 3. He's kind of playing more of a he's pretty much playing more of a 3. He's even gotten some starting opportunities, but
yes,
I'm honestly like Sadiq Bey is a guy who's earned the right to these minutes, and Sekou Doumbouya really hasn't, and that's a big reason why you're seeing Sadiq get a lot of this opportunity, and the fact that he is comfortable playing the 3, whereas Sekou may not be comfortable playing the 3. That's another big one, because that is a position group that is decimated right now. We have Jerami Grant that can move to the 4. We have Blake Griffin that can play, that obviously plays the 4. We have guys that are able to play in that 4 position that Sekou really wants to play, but he isn't playing as maybe we have seen Sekou play the 3 a little bit, but again, he hasn't been really effective much in that spot. So, whereas Sadiq Bey has.
Yeah, and it comes right back down to what I just mentioned, the fact that it's the hustle, and it's Sekou. I'm gonna just keep mixing their names up. Sekou has looked straight up checked out in his last few games. I don't know if that is a direct result of him just not being on the court as much or what, but he's looked straight up checked out. Whereas Sadiq Bey has been looking locked in, has been getting more and more minutes as a result of it. So I do think it's directly related to hustle, and I am starting to get worried that if that's kind of the effort that Sekou's showing in practice, that's what will make me get worried about him. But speaking of high effort guys, Jerami Grant, Jesus, this guy's been killing it already this season. He's making his contract look worth it. But that's not what I don't want to talk about how good he's been playing. I don't want to talk about his contract. What I want to talk to you about is this.
Are you at all worried, though, with Jerami Grant before we move on, that it's like he's this good out of necessity?
Well, I mean, the whole reason he wanted to come to Detroit was to be able to kind of spread his wings a bit and take on more of a load in the offense and get more minutes. And so he wanted a place where he was going to have to be good out of necessity, where he was going to have to take on more of that load. So it doesn't really worry me as much because he's doing it. Like it's not like it's out of necessity and he's not being consistent with it. Like it's out of necessity and he's answering the call.
I mean, he's had some rough nights. He's had, like, the numbers look nice. He puts up 20 plus points and 6-7 boards, but he shoots like 38% from the floor. Like, he's had some nights where he really wasn't as effective. Like against the Bucks, he shot 10 of 25. Like 25 shots is a lot, and only make 10 of them. That's not a great number. So he's had some nights where he's been bad, but he's putting up 25 shots because he has to. Like, nobody comes anywhere close to shooting that much with the rest of this team. Now, not taking anything away from his play, because he has been absolutely fantastic, and he is, in my opinion, one of the lone bright spots with the talent on this team. But I am also a little bit worried about him burning out by the end of the year, because they are relying on him so much, and he is shooting so much. But again, from what I'm seeing with Jerami Grant right now, I've loved his play. He's been awesome. I do think a little bit is out of necessity, but he's been asked to play a certain role and asked to step up a lot, and he's accepted the call and been a huge focal point for this team, to the point where Blake Griffin's kind of been an afterthought in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and this is a question I'm not seeing a lot of Pistons fans bringing up, and I guess it's kind of a question that almost feels too early to talk about, but at the same time,
I can't. The route that I'm thinking. I
can't help but think about it. Is he our biggest trade asset?
You went there. Yes. I actually think yes, he is. Outside of maybe like Josh Jackson, who's shown flashes, but also has kind of fallen back to earth a little bit. But yes, I actually do think he could be our biggest trade asset. The contract is big. Don't get me wrong. It's a big contract. But as of right now, he is kind of outplaying a little bit. And there are teams out there that could potentially be interested in a guy like this to... Maybe they want to go for it in the next couple of years, and that's a guy that is a piece that they need, and so maybe Jerami Grant is the biggest trade asset we have on this team. And do I want to see the Pistons trade him away? I mean, no, but I mean, you really could get something good for him at this point.
He still has.
I like that you went there, though. I was thinking it.
He's just now starting to enter his prime, so there could be a little back-end overlap when this is a competing team and Jerami Grant's still here. So like there is that going for him, but at the same time, you could get some legitimate assets for Jerami Grant.
Absolutely.
So it like if we're sitting here on draft day and we have the number 1 overall pick and staring Cade Cunningham right in the face.
Oh yes.
But you also have the opportunity to garner another pick and grab a guy like, let's say, Jalen Suggs. To move, but you have to move Jerami Grant to do it. Are you doing that?
Yes. I mean, you want to talk about like just sending this rebuild into the stratosphere. That's how you do it. Like you look at what the Clippers did in years past, or what they tried to do, I should say. But getting all that draft capital is something that can launch your rebuild into heights and push it forward so much quicker than you ever expected. Now, that's not to say Jerami Grant couldn't be here for this rebuild and be a focal point of the building of this organization. But as you mentioned, like the tail end of his prime is when the window probably begins to open for the Pistons to start winning. So he won't be around for the long-term situation of them winning, which could be a problem. And the Pistons potentially trading him could be a situation where they take advantage of him outplaying what they expected of him. So, I kind of don't hate the idea of the Pistons dealing him to get, maybe not draft capital this year, maybe some high-end draft capital next year, or... Maybe you look at a really young piece that could turn be really him into good.
Emily Bates next year.
Oh yes,
Imani Bates.
Imani Bates would be 2 years, I believe.
It's next year, I thought, right? Because he's unless they change the rule, he goes to Michigan State next season.
Yes, it would be.
And then so the 2022 draft,
the 2022 draft would be okay.
Exactly. But and then the last little bit of, well, I shouldn't say a little bit because it's probably the biggest piece of Pistons news is the Killian Hayes injury.
No, hang on.
Yeah, he's the 2022 draft. Because he would be playing in 2021, or the 2021-2022 season is when he'd be playing in Michigan State.
2023 is his draft year, not 2022. He's part of the 2022 class. His draft eligible year is 2023.
Okay. I misjudged that one.
Yes, because he'd be playing college basketball in 2022, 2023, so it would be the year after that.
But yeah, Killian Hayes tore his labrum in his hip, which I didn't know there was a labrum in your hip.
Yes, I believe you have 2 labrums, one in your hip, one in your shoulder.
I thought it was just a shoulder muscle, so I didn't realize.
Tendon, but yes.
Tendon. I did not realize that was something in your hip. Now, after doing some research, this is the same injury that Isaiah Thomas had, not the Pistons Isaiah Thomas, the Celtics Isaiah Thomas. And he quite hasn't looked the same since.
Understatement.
Now, obviously,
he was also a lot older.
Killian is a lot younger, is what I was getting at. But are you at all worried with this injury in terms of it affecting? I mean, yes, it's a given it's going to affect his development because you're missing some crucial time when you didn't even have a preseason or an offseason to work with. But in terms of just actually affecting his movement, athleticism in general in the future affecting what he could do on the court. Are you worried about that happening?
Yes, absolutely. Because now I'm looking at next year probably being what would be considered his rookie year, except it's his rookie year where he had a labral tear in his hip.
Yeah,
that's not a good. The prior, like in his freshman year of college or senior year of whatever, like it's a year where you're taking a chance on a guy to be a first round pick, a lottery pick that is coming off of a major injury that probably is going to require surgery. And this is now his rookie year. Like, absolutely, this is something that worries me for the development of him. And what we saw it pretty much destroy Isaiah Thomas's career. He never was the same player after that. Sure, he was a lot older. Killian Hayes is only, 19 years old? Like, he's a very young player and a very young guy that could recover from this. But to lose an entire year of development, sure, he still gets to sit in practices and see coaching and see things work, how things work, and learn, but he doesn't get to do it by doing it. He has to learn from the sideline, and I do think that's going to hurt his development quite a bit. Plus, now we're taking a chance on a guy that has had a serious injury very early in his career, and that's something that is a big cause for concern that could put a huge wrinkle in this rebuild for sure.
And I did do some research on the injury itself, and from what I gathered, it seems like when you get this injury, you're often genetically predisposed to it, and it means that you have a bone in your hip that is a bit protruding and starts wearing at that tendon and wearing it out until it eventually tears. Now, again, there have been reports that he has a choice to either get surgery and he'll miss a season, or he can just rehab it and come back in a couple months. But if what I've been reading is accurate, I don't see why you wouldn't get the surgery, because the surgery would effectively pare down that bone and so that and repair the tendon and then pare down the bone so that it no longer
so that there's no risk of future injury or as much of a risk. No, I agree 100%.
I feel like if you're obviously we're not doctors, but like I know that a lot of Pistons fans could be eager to get Killian back on the court and continue his rookie year development, but it feels like to me, based on what I've read, that if you really want Killian to be a part of the Futures organization, it seems to me like getting the surgery is the best thing for him. But that's just from what I've gathered. So
I agree 100%. A guy that young, I don't see any reason not to do the surgery, especially if it can prevent future complications. So I absolutely 100% agree.
One final thing, and this is a little fun little thing at the factoid at the end. I did find out that the Detroit Pistons are actually currently on pace to be the second most competitive 60-loss team of all time.
Nice.
behind only the 2017-2018 Grizzlies. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that year ended with them getting Jaren Jackson in the draft, I want to say.
I think so. Now, 60-loss team as in like they'll lose 60 games this year even though it's a shortened season?
I think so.
Sweet.
Oh man! Is that not what we wanted? We wanted a competitive 60-loss team.
Yeah, that's what I said. This team, I wanted them to be, and that's what they are. I mean, they're at least entertaining to watch. Like they're in games. They just don't have a guy that can put them up into that next level. So, but is that all you got?
That's everything I got.
All right, that is going to close it out for this week, guys. We thank you for listening. Tons to talk about today, especially with the Lions. But we will catch you guys next week. Hope you enjoyed. And thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast. Thank you guys as well, Andrew. Thank you for joining me. Follow us on Twitter at RealFanReport. And as football season comes to an end, obviously the news won't stop with the Lions because there's always the offseason's like the best time for the Lions because that's when our Super Bowl is, which is the draft. We always get so excited about the draft. But Pistons talk will continue, and we hope to have something exciting to talk about with some of these young guys as the season goes by. So, but thank you guys again for listening. This has been the Fan Reporters by fans.
For fans.
We'll catch you guys next week. Thanks. Have a good one.
Peace.